Maya Bennett smoothed the front of her red dress for the third time in 2 minutes, the fabric warm from her own nervous hands, and told herself that a blind date was not the end of the world even if her sister had picked the restaurant, the dress, and apparently the entire evening without asking her opinion once. The restaurant sat on the 52nd floor of a glass tower in the middle of Tokyo, and through the wall of windows behind her the city spread out in 1,000 small fires, red and gold and white, stretching toward a horizon she still had not gotten used to after only 4 months of living here. She worked as a translator for an international shipping firm, the kind of job that paid well enough to afford a view like this but never let her actually sit down and enjoy it, and tonight her older sister Priya had insisted she take one night off to meet a man named Takashi, who worked in finance and who, according to Priya, was exactly her type. Maya had her doubts about that. She had doubts about most things her sister arranged. She checked her phone under the table, the screen glowing against the white tablecloth, and saw nothing. No text. No missed call. Just the reservation confirmation from an hour ago and the growing, cold certainty that she had been stood up in a $500 dress in a city where she barely knew anyone. She glanced toward the entrance one more time, half expecting to see a flustered stranger apologizing for traffic, and instead her eyes caught on a man who was not looking for anyone at all. He moved through the restaurant the way water moves around a rock, everyone else adjusting course without seeming to notice they were doing it. He wore a black suit with a faint pattern woven into the fabric that only showed itself when the light hit it right. No tie, the collar of his white shirt open enough to reveal the edge of ink at his throat, dark lines that disappeared beneath the fabric and made Maya wonder, absurdly, what the rest of the picture looked like. His hair was dark and a little too long for the boardroom, brushed back from his face in a way that looked effortless and probably was not. He was tall, broad through the shoulders in a way the suit did not hide so much as sharpen, and when the host bowed to him at the entrance, the man barely inclined his head in return, as if the gesture cost him something he did not particularly want to spend. Maya watched him cross the room toward a table near the window, watched 3 separate servers reroute their paths without being asked, and felt something in her chest tighten that had nothing to do with being stood up. Even the sommelier, a stern older man who had barely glanced at Maya all evening, straightened at the sight of him, adjusting his tie before crossing the floor with a bottle he had not been asked to bring. He sat 2 tables away, angled so she could see the line of his jaw, and the way his eyes moved once across the restaurant, cataloging, before settling nowhere in particular. She told herself to look away. She did not look away fast enough, and his eyes caught hers before she managed it, dark and unreadable, and for 1 full second neither of them moved. Then he looked back toward the window, and Maya felt her face go hot, and she reached for her water glass just to have something to do with her hands. Her phone buzzed. A text from Takashi, finally, 3 words long. Something came up. No apology, no explanation, just the casual cruelty of a man who had never intended to show up at all. Maya set the phone face down on the table and exhaled slowly through her nose, and when she looked up again the host was approaching her table with an expression she could not quite place, something between apologetic and confused. "I am sorry to disturb you," the host said, keeping his voice low, "but there's been a mix-up with the seating tonight, and we would like to offer you a complimentary reseating if you are willing." Maya blinked. "A mix-up," she repeated. "The kitchen would like to correct an error," the host said, which told her absolutely nothing, and before she could ask a follow-up question, he was already gesturing toward the table by the window, toward the man in the black suit, who was watching this exchange with an expression of mild, contained amusement that suggested he had orchestrated the entire thing himself. She was too proud to simply refuse and too curious to walk away, so she found herself standing, smoothing her dress one final time, and crossing the short distance between tables, while half the restaurant pretended not to watch. He rose as she approached, which surprised her, an old-world gesture she had not expected from a man who otherwise looked like he answered to no one, and he pulled out the chair across from his own with one hand while the other rested briefly on the back of it, close enough that she caught a note of cedar and something like smoke when she sat down. "I did not order a mix-up," Maya said once she was seated, deciding that if he was going to play games, she was not going to pretend otherwise. "No," he agreed. "I did." She studied him for a moment, The calm set of his mouth, the stillness in his hands where they rested on the table, and something about the honesty of the admission disarmed her more than a lie would have. Most men lied by instinct. This one told the truth like it cost him nothing, because he had already decided the outcome either way. "That is either very charming or very concerning," she said. "I have not decided which." "Kaido," he said, offering his name the way some men offer a hand to shake, simple and unadorned. "And you were sitting alone looking at your phone like it had personally wronged you. I assumed there was a story." "There is," she said. "It involves a man who did not have the decency to cancel before I put on this dress." "Then he is a fool," Kaido said, and there was no flattery in the way he said it, only fact, stated the way a man states the weather. They talked through the appetizer course, and Maya found herself surprised at how easy it was, how he asked questions and then actually waited for the answers instead of using the silence to plan his next sentence. He told her about the translation work, about growing up outside Atlanta, about the way her sister had dragged her across an ocean for a job neither of them had fully understood the scope of when she accepted it. He told her almost nothing about himself in return, and she noticed that, filed it away the way she filed away every small inconsistency in a contract before she signed it. He asked about her work but redirected every question about his own. He knew the sommelier by name. He knew the head chef well enough that the man came out personally to greet him, bowing low, calling him nothing at all, no title, just a nod of deep and careful respect that told Maya more than any introduction could have. "You know everyone here," she observed, halfway through the second course, "and yet I do not know what you do."
"Business," he said.
"Various kinds." "That is not an answer." "It is the only one I am giving tonight," he said, and there was something in his eyes when he said it, something that was not quite amusement and not quite warning, a shape underneath the words that made her chest go tight again in a way she did not have a name for yet. She decided for tonight not to push. She told herself it was manners. She suspected, somewhere underneath the suspicion, that it was something closer to wanting the evening to continue exactly as it was. That was the moment everything changed, though she would not understand the size of it until much later. The sommelier arrived with a bottle Kaido had not ordered, poured 2 glasses, and retreated without a word, and as he set his glass down Maya noticed for the first time the ink at his wrist, visible now that his sleeve had shifted, dark lines curling up from beneath the cuff in a pattern too deliberate to be careless.
She did not ask about it.
She filed it away with everything else. The evening deepened, and somewhere between the second course and the dessert, she stopped thinking about Takashi entirely, stopped thinking about the fact that this whole night had begun as her sister's idea of a favor, and started simply existing inside the conversation the way she rarely let herself do with anyone. Kaido had a way of listening that made her feel like the only person in the restaurant, though she suspected that was less about her and more about a discipline he had built over years, the kind of attention that came from a man who had learned, somewhere, that missing details could cost him something important. She wondered what those costs had looked like. She did not ask. At one point, she caught herself laughing, really laughing, at something dry and understated he had said about the restaurant's absurdly small dessert portions, and the sound of her own laughter surprised her, unguarded in a way she had not allowed herself to be in months. It was near the end of the meal, when the plates had been cleared and the candle between them had burned low, that the first crack in the evening's calm surface appeared. A man entered the restaurant, moving too fast for the space, his jacket wrong for the room, his eyes scanning the tables with a hunger that had nothing to do with hunger for food. Maya noticed him before Kaido did, or thought she did, until she saw Kaido's hand go still on the table, completely still, the kind of stillness that comes right before a held breath. "Do not turn around," Kaido said quietly, his voice not changing in pitch or volume but shifting entirely in weight, and Maya felt the air in her lungs go thin. "I was not planning to," she said, keeping her own voice low, surprising herself with how steady it came out.
"Good," he said.
"Stay exactly where you are." The man in the wrong jacket crossed toward the bar, spoke briefly to someone Maya could not see, and left again, and the whole exchange took perhaps 90 seconds, and by the end of it Kaido's hand had relaxed slightly on the table though his eyes had not softened at all.
"Someone you know," Maya said. It was not quite a question.
"Someone who works for people I know," Kaido said. He is not important tonight. But he could be important another night, Maya said, watching his face for the lie, and did not find one, which unsettled her more than a lie would have. I would not let anything happen to you here, he said, and the certainty in his voice was not the certainty of a man making a promise he was unsure he could keep. It was the certainty of a man stating a fact about the structure of the world as he had built it. That was when she made the mistake of looking up and meeting his eyes fully, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with the wine or the candlelight or the fact that she had come here expecting a different man entirely. She thought, with a kind of dawning and unwelcome clarity, that whoever Kaito actually was, he was not the kind of man who ate at rooftop restaurants because he enjoyed the view. "Who are you?" she asked quietly, and meant it as a real question this time, not conversation. "Someone who is glad your date did not show up," he said, which was not an answer at all, and yet it was the only answer he gave her, and somehow it was enough to keep her sitting there instead of leaving. The valet brought his car around at the end of the night, black, low, expensive in a way that did not need to announce itself, and he walked her to it without asking whether she wanted a ride, simply assuming it and being right. The city moved past the windows in long smears of light, and Maya found herself watching his hands on the wheel instead of the skyline, the same stillness in them that she had noticed at dinner, controlled, precise, nothing wasted. "Can I ask you something?" she said somewhere past the third intersection. "You can ask," he said. "I may not answer. The man tonight. The one you told me not to look at. Was he actually dangerous, or were you protecting my feelings about a business rival?" Kaito was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he would deflect again, and then he said, "He works for a man who does not like me very much, and the feeling is returned," and left it there, and something about the flatness of the statement told her it was truer than anything else he had said all night. He dropped her outside her apartment building, and instead of simply driving away he got out, came around, opened her door before she could reach for the handle herself, an old habit dressed up as courtesy. He walked her to the entrance, and under the flickering light of the awning she caught, for the first time, the full shape of the ink at his collarbone where his shirt had shifted, dark and deliberate, disappearing beneath fabric she was suddenly and unhelpfully curious about. "Thank you for the mix-up," she said, trying to sound lighter than she felt. "Thank you for staying," he said, and there was something almost startled in his own voice, as if the words had surprised him on the way out. She should have left it there. She almost did. Instead she said, "I do not even know your last name," and he smiled, the first full smile she had seen from him all night, and it changed his whole face, softened something in it that had been braced the entire evening. "Nakamura," he said. "Kaito Nakamura. And I intend to see you again if you will let me." She should have said no. She had every reason to say no, standing in front of a man whose associates walked into restaurants like predators scanning a field, whose stillness felt trained rather than natural, whose entire evening had been built on an orchestrated mix-up he admitted to without shame. Instead she found herself saying, "I suppose that depends on whether you plan on being honest with me next time," and he said, "I will be as honest as I can afford to be," which was the most honest thing anyone had said to her all year, and she went inside with her heart doing something complicated and unfamiliar in her chest. The days that followed moved strangely. He called 2 days later, not texted, called, his voice low and certain over the line, and asked if she would have dinner with him again, somewhere quieter this time. She said yes before she had fully decided to. They met at a small restaurant in a neighborhood she did not recognize, low lighting, no other tables within earshot, and she noticed the way the owner greeted him with the same careful deference the chef at the rooftop restaurant had shown, the same absence of a title, the same weighted silence underneath the politeness. "You have this effect everywhere you go," she said, halfway through the meal. "People treat you like you own the room before you have said a word." "In some rooms," he said, "I do." "Which rooms?" she asked, and he set his chopsticks down, met her eyes directly, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked like a man deciding whether to tell the truth rather than a man who had already decided to withhold it. "I run an organization," he said finally. "It is not the kind of business you translate contracts for. It is not legal, most of it, and it is not gentle, and if I tell you more than that tonight, I am putting you in a position I do not think you are ready for." Maya sat with that for a long moment, feeling the floor of the evening tilt slightly beneath her, and then she said, "You could have lied to me. Most people would have." "I do not lie to people I intend to keep around," he said, and the words landed harder than she expected, and she understood, somewhere underneath the fear that was starting to bloom in her chest, that she was already in too deep to walk away cleanly, and some smaller and more reckless part of her did not want to.
"I need time," she said.
"To think about what that means."
"Take it," he said.
"I am not going anywhere." She did not see him for a week after that, though he called every night, brief conversations that never touched on the business again, just the ordinary texture of two people learning each other, her favorite foods, the music she listened to on the train, the fact that he had grown up in Osaka and lost his older brother when he was 23, killed by a rival organization that had wanted to send a message about who was allowed to expand into whose territory. He told her that part quietly, without drama, and she understood it was the wound underneath everything else about him, the thing that had made him build himself into stillness and precision because softness had gotten someone he loved killed once, and he had decided, somewhere in the aftermath, never to let it happen again. "I am sorry," she said when he finished. "Do not be," he said. "It made me who I am." "I am not certain that is entirely a good thing, but it is a true one." She went back to him after that, not because the danger had gotten smaller, but because she understood it better, and understanding it made her braver instead of more afraid. They fell into something that was not quite dating and not quite anything she had a word for, dinners in quiet restaurants, late walks through neighborhoods she had never explored on her own, his hand finding the small of her back in a way that was never presumptuous, always deliberate, always asking permission with the pressure of his palm before he ever asked with words. One evening, he took her to a small noodle shop near the harbor that had no sign outside at all, a place she would never have found on her own, and she watched him fold his tall frame onto a stool meant for someone half his size, ordering in a low, unhurried voice, and thought that this quiet, careful version of him was as far from the man who orchestrated seating charts as the moon was from the water it moved. He asked her, that night, what she missed most about home, and when she said the particular way afternoon light fell through her grandmother's kitchen window in Georgia, he was quiet for a long moment and then said that he did not think he had ever let himself miss a place the way she missed that window, and the admission felt like the most vulnerable thing he had told her yet, more than the business, more than the brother, simply the truth that he had built his whole life to need nothing. Enough to miss it. The danger found them again on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into whatever this was becoming. Maya was leaving her office building when a car pulled alongside her, too slow, windows too dark, and before she had fully processed the wrongness of it, a hand closed around her arm from behind and pulled her back against a chest she recognized by the smell of cedar and smoke before she recognized anything else. Kaido had appeared from nowhere, or from somewhere he had clearly been watching from, and he moved her behind him in one smooth motion, his body between her and the car, and said something short and hard in a tone she had never heard from him, and the car's window rolled down just enough to reveal a man's face, cold and assessing, before it rolled back up and the car pulled away into traffic. "Get in," Kaido said, and his own car was there, had apparently been there the whole time, and she did not argue, climbing in with her hands shaking in a way she was furious at herself for. "That was them," she said, once the doors were shut and the car was moving. "The people who do not like you." "Yes," he said, his jaw tight, his hands white-knuckled on the wheel in a way that was the first genuine loss of composure she had seen from him.
"They know about me now."
"They have known about you for a week," he said. "I was hoping to keep it that way longer." "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, and he glanced at her, something raw moving behind his eyes. "Because telling you would have meant admitting how much you already matter to me," he said, "and once I admit that out loud, it becomes a weapon someone else can use." She sat with that for a long moment, watching the city blur past the windows, feeling the fear in her chest reshape itself slowly into something with edges instead of just noise. "I am not going anywhere," she said finally, echoing his own words back to him. "Even now. Especially now." "You should be afraid," he said. "I am," she said. "That is not the same thing as leaving." He took her to a building she had never seen before, high floor, spare and expensive furnishings, And for the first time, she understood. She was standing inside the actual center of his life rather than the careful edges of it he had shown her at restaurants. Men in dark suits nodded to him in the hallway with the same weighted silence she had noticed everywhere else, and one of them, older, gray at the temples, approached with a report she could not hear the details of, and Kaido's face went through a series of small, controlled changes as he listened, landing finally on something grim. "They found out through someone inside," he said, once the older man had gone. "Someone I trusted told them where to find you." "Who?" Maya asked. "I intend to find out tonight," he said, and something in his voice made her understand this was not a metaphor, that whatever happened next would be violent and final in a way she had never been close to before, and she felt, beneath the fear, an unexpected and fierce refusal to be shielded from it entirely.
"I want to help," she said.
"Absolutely not," he said, the fastest and flattest refusal she had heard from him yet.
"You said I already matter to you," she said.
"That means this is already my problem too, whether either of us likes it." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, and then he said, quietly, "You're the first person in longer than I can remember who has made me feel like something other than a weapon that happens to wear a suit, and I do not know what to do with that, and it terrifies me more than the man in that car does." The confession sat between them, heavier than anything he had said before, and Maya crossed the small distance, separating them, and put her hand flat against his chest, feeling his heart beating fast and hard beneath her palm despite the stillness of his face. "Then let me stand next to you instead of behind you," she said. He did not answer with words. He answered by pulling her into him, one hand at the back of her neck, the other at her waist, and kissed her the way a man kisses something he has decided, finally and completely, he is not willing to lose, slow at first, and then not slow at all, and when he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and his breathing was unsteady in a way nothing about him had been all night. "We do not have time for this right now," he said, though he did not let go of her. "We are making time," she said, and kissed him again before he could argue. The betrayal, when it surfaced fully the next day, came from a man named Rern, one of Kaido's own lieutenants, someone who had stood at his side for a decade and had apparently decided that decade was not enough loyalty to outweigh the money offered by a rival organization looking to weaken Kaido from the inside. Kaido told her the name with a stillness that was worse than anger, and Maya understood, watching his face, that this was the same kind of betrayal that had taken his brother, blood loyalty broken for profit, and that the wound she had heard about weeks earlier had just been reopened in real time. "Ren will come for you directly now," Kaido told her, pacing the length of the apartment in a way she had never seen him do before, restless, coiled. "He knows I will do anything to protect you. That makes you the fastest way to hurt me." "Then we do not wait for him to choose the moment," Maya said, and Kaido stopped pacing to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean I am not going to sit in a room and be a target while you handle this somewhere else," she said. "I know how contracts work. I know how people hide things in plain language. If Ron has been dealing with this rival organization, there is a paper trail somewhere, emails, transfers, something. Let me help you find it instead of hiding from it." Kaido looked at her for a long moment, something like fear and something like pride mixing in his expression in equal measure. "That is not a translator's job," he said. "No," she agreed. "It is the job of someone who refuses to be rescued and would rather do the rescuing herself." They worked through the night, Kaido's people pulling records, Maya's trained eye catching the small linguistic inconsistencies in a set of shipping documents that everyone else had read past a dozen times, a phrase translated slightly wrong, a company name that did not quite match its registration, a pattern that traced back, patiently and unmistakably, to Ren's signature buried 3 layers deep in a transaction meant to look like nothing at all. Somewhere near 3 in the morning, exhausted, her eyes burning from reading contract language in a second language for hours, she looked up to find Kaido watching her instead of the documents, and when she asked what he was staring at, he only said that he had never in his life had someone fight this hard for him without being paid or ordered to, and she told him, simply, that she was not doing it for him. She was doing it for both of them, and the distinction seemed to matter to him more than anything else she had said all night. By dawn they had what they needed, and Kaido looked at the printout in his hands like it was both a gift and a grief. "He was like a brother to me," he said quietly. "I know," Maya said, and put her hand over his. The confrontation happened 2 nights later, in a warehouse near the harbor that smelled of salt and diesel and old rust, and Kaido had wanted her nowhere near it, had argued with her for the better part of an hour before finally understanding that she was not going to be talked out of it, that his protection of her only meant something if she was allowed to be a person with agency inside it rather than a possession kept safe in a box. She stood at the edge of the room, out of the direct line of anything, but present, watching Ren's face crumble from confidence into panic as Kaido laid the documents on a table between them, one by one, the evidence of a decade of loyalty undone by a set of numbers in a spreadsheet. "You would throw away everything we built for money," Kaido said, and his voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than shouting would have been. "You do not understand what they offered," Ren said, and the desperation in his voice was raw and ugly. "They offered me my own territory. My own name. I was tired of being your shadow." "You were never my shadow," Kaido said. "You were my brother's friend before you were mine. I trusted you with everything he left behind." The room held its breath, and then one of the men who had come with Ren, someone Maya had not clocked as a threat until his hand moved toward his jacket, went for a weapon, and everything happened very fast. Maya saw the movement before Kaido did, positioned as she was at an angle he could not see, and she did not think. She moved, grabbing a metal pipe from a stack of supplies near the wall and swinging it hard into the man's wrist before the weapon cleared his jacket, sending it clattering across the concrete floor. The man howled and staggered back, and Kaido's own men closed the distance in the same instant, and the moment of chaos resolved itself almost as fast as it had begun, leaving Ren standing alone in the center of the room, exposed and finished, his allies disarmed, and his choices gone. Kaido's eyes found Maya across the room, wide with something that was not quite shock, and she held his gaze steadily, breathing hard, the pipe still gripped in her hand. "You could have been killed," he said, once it was over, once Ren had been led away by men who would deal with the consequences of his betrayal in ways Maya did not ask about. "So could you," she said. "That is not a reason to stand still." He crossed the room and took her face in both hands, careful despite the urgency in his eyes, and said, "I have spent my whole life believing that caring about someone means they become a weakness that gets used against you. I told myself staying close to you was survival instinct, that I could control it, keep it small. I was lying to myself. It stopped being small the night you sat down across from me and asked if I intended to be honest with you." "And are you," she asked, "being honest with me now?" "I am telling you that I do not know how to be the man I was before you, and I am not certain I want to find out," he said, and it was not a declaration wrapped in poetry. It was rawer than that, more dangerous, an admission that cost him something visible in the giving of it, and Maya understood it was the truest thing he had ever said to her. There was a cost to that night beyond the obvious one. Kaido lost a piece of the organization's trust in its own foundations, spent the following weeks rebuilding loyalty that Ren's betrayal had cracked, meeting with men who questioned him in rooms Maya was never invited into, restoring order to a structure that had trusted the wrong man for a decade. Maya watched him carry the weight of that loss quietly, the grief of losing someone who had once been close to him even as the necessity of the loss remained clear. She did not try to fix that grief for him. She simply stayed present through it, cooking dinner in his apartment on nights he came home late and silent, sitting with him without demanding conversation, learning that some kinds of comfort required no words at all. On one of those quiet nights he told her, almost offhandedly, that he had started sleeping through the night again for the first time in years, and when she asked why, he only looked at her like the answer should have been obvious, and did not need to say it out loud for her to understand exactly what he meant. Weeks passed, and the shape of her life reorganized itself around a truth she had not expected to accept so completely. She kept her job, kept her independence, kept the parts of herself that had existed before Kaido Nakamura walked into a restaurant and rearranged a seating chart to sit across from her. But she also learned the geography of his world in careful pieces, learned which of his people to trust and which to watch, learned that the ink at his collarbone traced back to a promise made to his brother the year he died, a promise of loyalty and vengeance both, inked into skin because some vows could not survive only as words. On a clear evening months later, they stood together on the balcony of his apartment, the same city spread beneath them that had glittered outside the restaurant window the night they met, and Kaido turned to her with something in his hands, small, wrapped in plain paper rather than anything ostentatious, and when she opened it, she found a simple ring, not an engagement, he told her quickly, before she could misread it, but a mark, the same kind his own people wore, a signal to anyone who might look for a weakness in him that she was not a weakness at all. She was a claim, chosen and defended and permanent in a way nothing else in his life had ever been allowed to be. "I am not asking you to marry me tonight," he said. "I am asking you to let the world know exactly what you are to me, so no one makes the mistake of thinking they can use you against me again." Maya turned the ring over in her fingers, feeling the weight of everything it represented, the danger it acknowledged rather than hid from, and she looked up at him, at the man who had once told her he only lied to people he did not intend to keep, and she said, "I already knew what I was to you. I just wanted to hear you admit it out loud." "I am admitting it now," he said. "Every part of it. No more careful edges." She let him slide the ring onto her hand, and the city lights kept burning below them, indifferent and endless, and somewhere in that skyline a rival organization was recalculating what it meant that the coldest boss in Tokyo had chosen, finally and completely, to be known. Maya did not think about the danger that still existed beyond the balcony doors. She thought instead about the stillness in his hands the night they met, the same stillness now resting against the small of her back, no longer guarded, no longer careful, simply certain, the way he had been certain about everything from the very first night, except now that certainty included her, fully and without apology, and she found she was not afraid of what that certainty might cost either of them, because she had already decided, somewhere between the pipe in her hand and the ring on her finger, that some things were worth the risk of losing. If you made it to the end of this one, thank you for staying with Maya and Kaido through every twist. If their story pulled you in, do not forget to like this video, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Maya's shoes, and subscribe so you never miss the next dark romance waiting for you. I will see you in the next story.